All right. Well, hello, everyone. I want to thank all of you for joining us for this presentation. I'm going to give you a minute or two for people to come in and continue to sign in. In the meantime, if you are joining us through the use of a smartphone, I would recommend switching to a desktop or even a laptop, because some of the slides that you're going to see throughout the next 45 to 50 minutes will be very hard for you to read on your phone. So please be aware that I'm doing this workshop solo as well, which means I can't monitor the chat during the presentation. So we've created a question box instead. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and our team will get back to you and we'll be able to answer those questions after the workshop. I have a lot of information that I want to get through, and it looks like the people are signed in. So let's get started. Once again, thank you all for joining us for this. The title of today's presentation is How to Pay for Your Child's College Education with as little out-of-pocket as possible. We believe all families can get on board with this. We also call it an insider's guide to getting maximum money for college. My name is John Borick. I'm a certified college advisor and funding specialist through the ACCFS. Keep in mind that the information that you're going to see throughout this presentation is based on current laws and regulations, and that changes often. So the information will be general in nature, since every family's situation is a little complex and a little bit different. So it comes down to finances, your earnings, income, grandparents' money that they have provided for their kids. So keep all of that in mind, and to know that it would certainly be malpractice on our part to give you individual information. So with that in mind, we offer 1 hour one-on-one consultations absolutely free of charge, so we can review your specific and individual situation. We'll get into all of that and discuss details of that later in this workshop. Well, I work for a tremendous company with the Paradigm Financial Group. We are headquartered in Exton, Pennsylvania. Now, 20 years ago, we discovered the need for college planning and really how the financial side of this was interconnected. And from that, Elite Collegiate Planning was born, and the importance of ensuring higher education while also preserving your retirement. A little over 5 years ago, we also took over the College Planning Network, which is the interface in which parents and students interact on our portal. And we also have the College Knowledge Podcast, where university insiders come on and discuss everything pertaining to higher education, some programs, some of the latest technology. So it's a very good podcast, and something that I recommend that you go on and listen to wherever you listen to your podcasts. Well, as I said before, our goal is really very simple, and that is to find the best fit for your child. Now, if done correctly, the college planning process is an ongoing sequential process, and the earlier that you get started, really the less stressful and the more cost efficient it's going to be for everybody. And the way that I like to lay it out is, my analogy is that of a football game. Do you want the playbook in the first quarter, which would be your student's freshman year of high school, or do you want to wait and get the playbook when your child is a senior in the fourth quarter? And by that time, sometimes it can be too late. So when we break it down, our goal is really to find the best fit for your child and for your family. And that is an academic fit. There's really three core components: an academic fit, a social fit, and a financial fit. And if you bring those three together, overall, you're going to get the best fit for the child and for the family themselves. Now, one of the wild things about college planning is that some schools and universities cost as much as $80,000 a year, but yet the average family winds up paying under $30,000 to attend. Well, this workshop is really designed to teach you why and how that's possible. Now, as a team, we've done thousands of these consultations and presentations, and we ask our clients and prospects, like, what are your biggest concerns? And really, our research has determined that these 6 things are their parents' biggest concerns. The first 3 really pertain to the application process, and it's missing deadlines, it's making mistakes in the process, and really not having the time to do everything involved. After that, it's developing a plan to pay for college. And a lot of families are really late in the game when it comes to this, because ideally you can start the planning process when your child is 2 or 3 years old. Number 5, doing something that will hurt the child's chances for college admission. And number 6, doing something that will cause them to not get the most financial aid possible. All of these are real concerns, and we've seen it time and time again where families do something to where the child doesn't get into the school, their dream school, and they also don't take the necessary steps to ensure that they get the most financial aid from the colleges and universities. Well, you probably don't need to see this screen to know that college costs are skyrocketing. In fact, if you go back to 2000, only medical and hospital costs have risen at a greater rate than that of a college education. And when we're talking about the cost of attendance, the COA, it includes everything. It's your tuition, it's your room and board, it's your living expenses, fees, computer, phone. It's really the whole 9 yards. So the cost of attendance includes all of that. Now, 4 years for one student can cost anywhere between $100,000 and $350,000, depending on the school that they choose. And that's just for one child. All right, multiply that by the number of kids that you have. If you have 2 or 3 kids that you're expecting will go to college, and now you can see how the price and how much out of pocket is going to really cost you. And we're talking, it could be between $500,000 and $1 million. Keep in mind, with inflation, those numbers, the prices go up on average 7 to 8% every single year, and it can really add up over time. So the question is how is a family supposed to come up with all of this money? And there's really 5 ways to pay for college. Number 1 is savings. And every family can start the process, like I said, as early when your child is born. The second way to pay for it is loans. And the third is scholarships. Now, the fourth and fifth are what I like to call payment alternatives, going to a cheaper school or skipping college altogether. And of course, over the past few years, number 5 has become increasingly popular because of how the price of college has skyrocketed. And so we're trying to find other alternatives, whether that's a trade school or just not going to college altogether. So let's get into this a little bit. Let's take a look and talk specifically about savings. And if you could take the $200,000 and write the check right now, you probably wouldn't even be here, right? But who has that much in their pocket? Well, if you do have that much saved, or if you've accumulated some savings for college, I certainly would recommend a consultation, because that savings may throw you off. In other words, saving money can actually penalize you in the end. In fact, you could be a very prudent saver, and you can actually plan ahead, and colleges will dock you for that. In fact, $10,000 in savings could cost you between $500 and $2,500 in college grant money. So it's important that you need to know the rules before you step on the field and you play the game of college and financial aid. All right. There are several different ways that you can borrow money for college. And if you're going to borrow money, you got to ask the same questions that you would if you were borrowing money for a house. Are you going to get a tax deduction or not get one? Are you going to have a fixed monthly payment or a variable increasing payment? Will you have interest-free student loans or high-interest student loans? And are you going to have to take out a loan each and every semester, or have the funds readily available prior to the beginning of college? All questions that you need to ask, all questions that need to be sorted through. Once again, need to know these sort of rules. You need to know the certain steps before you step on the field and play the game as it pertains to loans. And there's a couple of loans that I want to really bring up specifically, all right? The federal direct student loan is probably the most favorable loan in the college arena, and it's the only loan that a student can get for a certain amount of time in their own name, in their own social security number. So no co-signature is required. These loans are given out by the federal government as a direct loan to the students themselves, and hence the name, the Federal Direct Student Loan. Interest rates are typically favorable. As you take a look at the number for this past year, 6.5% with a 1% origination fee. The problem with these particular loans, the Federal Direct Student Loan, is the borrowing amount is very limited. as you take a look at it, for the freshman year, you can only borrow a maximum of $5,500. Sophomore, it goes up a little bit more. Junior and senior year. In the end, your 4-year total on the federal direct student loan is $27,000 that a student can borrow. They can repay that once they get out of school, but that's a very little amount. And for many students out there, that doesn't even cover 1 year of tuition. So keep that in mind. It's nice that for some parents, they want their children to have some responsibility. They want them to have some stake in the game. This is a way to do it, but it's just not going to cover the full amount of college. All right, another loan that we want to talk about, and probably one of the more unattractive loans in the business, is called the PLUS loan. All right, so you're going to get many offers to sign up for a PLUS loan throughout the college process. Now, the PLUS loan stands for Parent Loans for Undergraduate Students. The difference from the federal direct student loan is it's a direct loan to the parent. The student's not even on the loan itself. So parents, you're 100% responsible for the debt. You apply through the FAFSA form. Payments typically start in the first 60 days, and they can last for 10 years, sometimes even longer. There's a fixed interest rate. For this past year, it was 8%, but you also have to tack on the 4 points in fees. So now you're looking at a loan that's exceeding in the 10 to 12% range, and it stacks and it compounds over the years. And I'll show you what that looks like. So we like to take this example. You got two kids that are going to school 2 years apart, and you're planning on taking loans out for both kids. All right. So let's say, as an example, you need to take out $40,000 per year per kid. The cost to borrow it, the fees, somewhat nominal, but your monthly payment starts at a little over $500 a month. But then this is where it really gets scary. You borrow the same amount for the first kid on the second year, so then the payment doubles. So now you've gone from year 1 to year 2, and the payment's gone from $500 over $1,000. By the time you get to year 3, you add that second child into the mix, and now that payment's doubled again. So in roughly 2 years, you've gone from $500 to $2,000. And then by the time you get up to year 6, that payment that $2,000 payment is now doubled to $4,000. And you can see how it can really get out of hand. And you're looking at a college loan payment or payments that probably exceed what you're paying for in the mortgage in your home. So the bottom line of this particular PLUS loan is that the cost can add up very quickly, and they can bury a family's finances. For some people, it's really the only option they have, and they don't look at other alternatives. So if you break down the fees, if you needed $40,000 per kid per year, that comes up to $320,000 for school. The total amount borrowed, $334,000, but tack on the interest, and you're looking at $175,000, and now you're paying over $500,000 to send 2 kids to a 4-year institution. Your highest monthly payment over $4,000. Your highest annual payment is over $50,000. So we asked the question, if you needed $40,000 per year, why borrow if you do have some of that money available, and if you can avoid this route of having to pay some of these exorbitant interest fees that are out there. In fact, the Wall Street Journal did a very good story from October 2021 on Baylor University and how they steered families to these Parent Plus loans. And as a result, Baylor had one of the worst repayment rates of any college in the country. So it is something that's still out there, and it's something that we like to guard our families against all the time. So the next way to pay for college is private scholarships. And of the $240 billion that's given out every year, the private scholarship makes up for, I think, less than 5%. It's not even a very significant amount of money. However, we'll typically see people waste an incredible amount of time chasing down $200, $300, $500 scholarships that are one-time only, and though they've spent hours on it. And typically when it comes to these types of scholarships, you hear about all the kids that win them, but you don't hear about all the hundreds of kids who lost out and didn't get a thing. A second part of this is that if you do win a private scholarship, those companies have to report that to the school, to the colleges and the universities that you apply to. And so if you win $2,000, sometimes the colleges and universities will take away the $2,000 that they were going to give you. So it's really not necessarily a win-win situation. So that's the scholarship aspect. Now, as for those other decisions, you can go to a cheaper school or skip college altogether. But remember, sticker price doesn't mean it's the actual price. So what you think is a cheaper school isn't always the cheapest school or the cheapest option. So if your son or daughter is committed to getting a degree, they're dedicated and determined, we always recommend going the college route. If you look at the Department of Education numbers, those who graduate with a college degree make 2 times more than those kids with just a high school diploma. And if you graduate from a Tier 1 school, those kids make 8 times more than those who graduate with just a diploma. So skipping college altogether is certainly not an option that we agree with. So how do they determine if your family is eligible for financial aid? Well, let's start with some misconceptions about financial aid. And the first misconception that we hear from thousands of families is that we make too much money for financial aid. And that is a big misconception. People are confused. They just don't understand it. Merit-based financial aid has zero to do with the financial position. And the staggering part for most people is that when college costs rise above $90,000 or in the $80,000 range, that now opens it up to a lot more families that weren't eligible before. My child is not a great student. That's why there is need-based aid out there. Some of you may say that, well, you own a home and that's going to be held against you, not as it pertains to filing the FAFSA form and the schools that only receive the FAFSA. So that's not even part of the computation. It is as it pertains to the CSS profile. Financial aid is just loans. Well, it's not just loans, and as you're about to see, financial aid is a much bigger number that comes from the colleges and universities that have nothing to do with loans. It's a quick and simple process, and anytime that you're dealing with government and where the government has involvement in the process, nothing's going to be quick and simple. And so when it comes to filling out forms, sometimes it can take 6, 8, 10, even 12 weeks to hear something back from the colleges and universities. And when you don't hear something back, it can create some stress and anxiety. So what we like to encourage families is try to take the emotion out of it. Don't get caught up in the stress, and don't get caught up if you don't hear something right away. I don't have to fill out financial aid forms. Well, if you don't want any help from the school and you want to pay that cost of attendance that you see advertised when you do a Google search, where certain schools come back at $70,000 or $80,000, if you feel comfortable paying the $80,000, go right ahead. Don't fill out the financial aid form. But regardless of what your financial position is, if you want any type of aid at all, you need to fill out the financial aid forms. And the final truth or myth that college aid officers will help. Yes, they will help, but college aid officers will help the college. They're not there to help you directly. And so when you look at colleges and how they're formed and how they have to pay for the professors that are on staff and the infrastructure, remember, it's coming out of your pocket. So they're trying to maximize the money that they get from you so that they can pay for everything as it pertains to the college and university. So they will help. They're just not going to work in your best interest. All right, so how is it all paid for? Well, $240 billion is handed out in financial aid. $70 billion of that comes out of the pockets of parents and students, but $240 billion comes from other sources, and that means there's far more money coming from other places than that's coming out of your pocket. So how do you get your hands on the money that is out there? Well, we like to break it up into two buckets of financial aid. We like to call it green money and red money. And the green money, well, that's essentially free money. And that comes in the form of grants, scholarships, endowments, tuition waivers, tuition reductions. The bottom line as it pertains to green money is it's money you don't have to pay back. The other side of that is the red money. and that is self-help aid. And that's money that you have to either pay back in the form of a federal loan, private loan, or money that you have to work for in the event of a federal work-study program. So it's important to know the difference between what is red money and what is green money, and how does it all work out when it comes to some of the award letters and how you're ultimately going to have to pay for college. The good news about all of this is that there's a lot more green money than there is red money. $145 billion in green money that never has to be paid back. And I think as of last year, $90 billion was loans. So that means substantially more money was given away than was lent out. So back to that misconception, people think that when they look at financial aid that it's mostly loans. It's simply not the reality. But you can see, looking at this chart, this graph, that there's a lot more green money out there than red money, and it's really coming down to, how do I get my hands? How does my family get their fair share of aid? Well, if you're going to have to write anything down in this presentation or want to take a picture, take a screenshot, it's the formula that you're going to want to understand about how the game of financial aid is played, and not getting into really all the nuance of the calculation, but this is the way it's laid out. The cost of attendance is a disclosed figure. You can find out the cost of attendance of any school. As of 2018, that cost of attendance amount has to be published by every institution each and every year. So for instance, $85,000 may be the cost of attendance to attend Columbia University, but the average cost was below $30,000. Student aid index, that is a number that is based on a parent's and a student's income, the assets, the ages of the kids in the household, and the number of people in school. So you would take your cost of attendance, subtract your student aid index, and that would produce the FN, the family need, financial need, family need. It's how much aid that the family is now eligible for. So let's put some numbers behind it. For example, if the cost of attendance is $50,000, your SAI, let's say your SAI comes back and is $20,000. So your family's need to attend a particular school would be $30,000. So that's the focus point. So it says 50, you want to pay 20, or you are capable of paying 20,000. So how do you get as close to your SAI as possible? And what's the goal? Well, we want to lower the SAI as much as you can, right? The lower the student aid index, the higher the family need, and the higher we are able to get money from the colleges and universities. Well, there's essentially three kinds of families that need what we call proper college planning. And over the years, we've worked with essentially all three types of families. The first is a family with total financial need. And here's some free advice to those families. You have to look at schools that have large endowments and funds that meet a high percentage of that need. And that's mostly going to come on the private school side. The important thing is that you've got to apply early in the process. Not saying early decision, early action, but just early. You want to get the forms done. You want to make sure that the forms are filled out accurately as quickly as possible, because if there's one thing you want to take out of this presentation, is that when it comes to financial aid, it's first come, first serve, and you want to be at the front of the line to take advantage of the money that's out there. Next type of family that we meet with and work with is typically the people that are, the majority of the people that watch this presentation are what we call Category 2 families. They have a partial financial need, and depending on how they're doing financially, they're either going to win the college game or they're going to lose on the college game. And so they may qualify for some need-based aid, and they may qualify for some merit-based aid, but it's really important that those who get the financial aid, it depends on which school that they choose and how their assets and their income are positioned. So those are really two key factors for these Category 2 families and for the majority of you out there watching. So it can really determine whether you win the college game or whether you don't. Then there's your Category 3 families, and these are typically the families who are not going to get at least need-based aid. Now, there's a lot of strategies that we can use for the higher net worth families out there to make sure that they're getting maximum merit-based financial aid and making sure that they're paying on a very tax-efficient way, in a tax-efficient basis, and not using bad money and not using money that they shouldn't, and by doing that, taking on taxable gains. So once again, there's a lot of things to consider, even for high net worth families out there, to where you can still take advantage of the situation and make sure that you're paying as little out of cost, and then in turn, also making sure you're not saddled with high tax bills when it's time to pay taxes. So we also want to maximize what we like to consider other people's money, and that's the money that you're going to get from the colleges and the universities. So where do we get the money for college? That's a good question, right? Well, there's four main sources of financial aid. Number one, the first is the federal government. That's through the direct student loans, the Parent Plus loans, Pell Grants, which are more favorable to lower income families. It doesn't mean that there isn't money for other families, but they are focused on the lower income families. Number two is the state government, and if you typically qualify for federal government money, in about 90% of the states, you also would qualify for state government funding as well. Number three is the biggest one. It's from the colleges and universities themselves, as we showed you in the graph before. That big green money, that's where that green money is going to come from, the college and universities. And then number four, we talked about this in the scholarship. It's the private sources. Are the private scholarship services worth it? That's a question that you have to ask. The way that we look at it, if you're talking about less than 5% of all the financial aid that's out there, why would you spend 50% of your time chasing less than 5% of the money that's out there? So that's your four main sources of college aid. Where to begin? How do you apply for financial aid? Well, it all starts with the FAFSA. And that stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is your gateway to financial aid, need-based, merit-based financial aid. You don't fill out the form, you don't apply, you get zero, and you pay the actual cost of attendance. If you make $1 million a year and you still want money from the school, you have to fill out the FAFSA. More importantly, you have to fill it out fully, and you have to fill it out accurately. The government has recently simplified the form a little bit. They've knocked down, used to be over 100 questions, now there's 30 plus questions. So they've tried to make it easy for a lot of families out there. But the important thing is that you get it done, you make sure that it is accurate, and that it is filled out on time, because if it's submitted incorrectly, it often gets pushed back some 4 to 6 weeks. And when that happens, all too frequently, it results in a loss of financial aid. And I can tell you, according to the Department of Education, roughly 70% of families who fill out the FAFSA form will have some form of mistake or errors to them. And when that happens, maybe it's a minor one, doesn't really cost you that much. Or it could be something that costs you thousands of dollars because you overreported or you misreported some of that financial information. Once again, if you have questions about this, that's why we urge you to take that one-on-one free consultation so we can kind of work through some of the numbers. Going beyond the FAFSA, the CSS profile registration form, many private schools want both forms. So there are what we call profile schools. Roughly 10 to 15% of the schools out there will require this. What does the CSS profile look for? Well, they want to get a little bit more in depth. They want to look at home equity, some details on income, some assets, some expenses. Once again, though, it has to be consistent with your FAFSA form, and it can be a little difficult to fill out. As I said, it gets a little bit more in depth with some of the questions that they're asking. So keep in mind that if you are looking at schools that do require the CSS profile. And then you're going to get some institutions have their own forms. Some schools are going to want you to fill out all three of them. Some schools even have their own lending institutions inside the school where they can lend out money, and then you're going to have to use that through their own endowment funds in order to getting money through the school. So there's institutional forms. Once again, consistency is the key. You want to make sure that the information is reported the same as you've done in some of the other forms, whether it's the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and they typically ask very similar questions. And then if you own a business or a farm, there's supplemental forms that you have to fill out to qualify for need and merit-based financial aid. If you're divorced or separated, we have a lot of families I know that can be in that boat. Once again, that can create some issues as well. The rules for both of these situations have changed over the past few years. That's very key to know. For instance, for a business, it used to be if you had 50 or more employees was the only time that you had to report information pertaining to your business. Now it doesn't matter how many employees you have. So knowing that type of information is very key. And if you fall under one of these two categories, once again, that's where that free one-on-one consultation can really come in handy and help you out. Not all colleges are created equal when it comes to distributing the money that you need. How's that the case? Well, schools don't meet need the same way. At least the percentage of need met and the type of aid, it all matters. It all is part of their overall equation. So some schools will meet 100% of need and others may only meet, somewhere between 30 and 50%. The key is what percentage of need met is gift aid, how much is free money, how much is self-help. It can make, and this is really critical when coming up and composing your list of schools, it can make expensive private colleges, believe it or not, cheaper than some of the state schools that are out there. Yet, you need to know these statistics before applying. So it goes beyond just knowing a school's overall cost of attendance, okay? So how does all of that work? Well, let's go back to that equation we were talking about earlier in the workshop here. Let's say your need is $30,000. Well, some schools will only meet 40%, which means that they're only going to give you, in terms of need-based aid, $12,000. So your unmet need is now $18,000. You've got to add that number, that unmet, that $18,000, to the $20,000, which is the number in your student aid index. That's the number that the government told you, hey, you can afford $20,000. Add that to your SAI, and now you're paying $38,000 out of pocket, even though your SAI says $20,000. And that's what really often makes private schools more affordable than some of the state schools that are out there. So we worked with a family. It was the Myers family, and this is a case study from a few years ago. And they're looking at a private school, and they wanted to see the comparison. They wanted to see how all of this was going to play out. So Franklin and Marshall College, compare that with Penn State University. All right, so let's take Franklin and Marshall. If you were to take a look at their cost of attendance, you'd see that the COA is $73,000. Their SAI was a little over $8,000, $8,100 and change. So the need to go to Franklin and Marshall was just over $65,000. All right. How does that look from the public school side? Penn State, cost of attendance, $37,000 plus. Same SAI. Remember, we're applying the SAI straight across the board, no matter what school you're looking at. And the need to go to Penn State was just over $29,000. Well, here's where really the difference breaks down. Franklin and Marshall, 100% of need is met. Now, 87% of that is in the form of gift aid. 13% of that is in either loans or work study. Penn State, on the other hand, only meets 58% of need. That left the Myers family with a $12,000 shortfall. And of that $12,000, 42% was free money, 58% was in the form of loans that had to be paid back. So what does that look like now that you see those numbers and you see that not the same amount of need-based aid isn't applied across the board equally? Well, what you actually pay for to go to Franklin and Marshall is $8,000. Remember, 100% of need is met. So that's the annual cost to go to Franklin Marshall was $8,000 for the Myers family. Compare that to Penn State, where now you're talking about $20,000. That's the annual cost. And so this is the type of information that we really believe is important to talk about, how to figure out where you are in the game. And when you take these numbers and now multiply it by the 4 years you're going to be in college, you can really see a staggering difference, right? The 4-year cost of attendance and the paper number to go to Franklin Marshall looked like it was close to $300,000. Yet this family only paid $32,000 out of pocket. For Penn State, it looked like it was about half the cost, about $150 to go to Penn State. But once you take the sticker price out of the equation and you factored in the cost of attendance and the equation, you see that Penn State, for 4 years, you're now paying $80,000. This happens every day. Every school all over the country, every family goes through this. They just don't know that in the end, that it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. So how do we get colleges to increase your award offer, and at that point, where you can even appeal the offer? Well, one of the things that I like to bring up to parents is sometimes some numbers out there can really work into your favor. And if you don't know the numbers of the school, and if you don't know your own numbers, how are you going to determine if you got a fair financial shake? And how much does a school typically award given your SAI and your child's academic performance? Well, there's some other pieces of information, and one of the pieces of information I like to certainly bring to the attention of the parents that we work with is knowing what the yield is. And the yield is the percentage of students who are actually admitted to that school divided by those who actually enrolled. So if you think about Ivy League schools, typically students who apply at an Ivy League school, if they get accepted, they're going to enroll. So their yield is going to be significantly higher. But if you take a look at maybe some of the lower tier schools, and we have a handful of those here on the East Coast, they have a lower yield. So when you have schools that have a lower yield, what does that typically tell you? Well, it tells you they're having a tougher time filling the seats. They're having a tougher time competing with some of the other colleges and universities out there. And in doing so, sometimes they have to offer a financial incentive to get their families to send their students to that college of their choice. They're no different than any other school. They have to fill seats. They want to make sure that those seats are filled. And so with some of these types of schools, they'd rather have 30% of your money than none of it at all. So that's the type of information that, and you can go and search for this type of information that may be out on the internet. But when it comes to yield, that's one of those analytics that can work in your favor. As far as some negotiations 101, how do you get colleges to increase your award? It's not uncommon for schools to miss award aid packages, under award aid packages, and compete with other schools. Because if you don't know the numbers of the school and you don't know your own numbers, how are you going to determine if you got a fair financial shake in the end? And how much does a school typically award given your SAI and given your child's academic performance? It's been well documented, and this is from Money Magazine. Almost all private schools and the majority of public schools also engage in what is called financial aid leveraging, which is the process of colleges trying to figure out how little money that they have to give you to get you to attend their particular institution. Happens all the time. All right, so with that, we want you to refer to some of the award letters that you can download. In that, you'll see some before and afters and how you can go back and work through the appeal process and actually work in your favor to come through some of these appeals. We do this all the time with some of the colleges that we work with, where we review, we analyze some of the award letters that you get during the springtime of your senior year. And if there is a need to appeal it and to get more money, that option is oftentimes on the table. We also call it finding some of the financial aid loopholes, and it's perfectly legal and ethical to make use of the rules that exist to your advantage. In fact, it's the same principle that people use with their CPAs when it comes to their taxes or with their attorneys as it pertains to legal matters. But once again, if you don't know the rules, how are you going to position yourself to receive the most money that's out there? So again, knowledge is power, and having this information at your fingertips is going to help you go a long way in the financial aid and the college game process. So again, to give you a perfect example, you've got two nearly identical families. One family's contribution, you can see, is $28,000. The other is $16,000. We're taking family A, family B, where the income, the assets, home equity, all of that is the same. Well, the difference can be roughly $12,000 500 difference in one particular year. So you take that number times 4 years, and you can see where Family B saved nearly $50,000 over the 4 years, and what Family A did, all because they took the time to understand the process, how all the pieces of the puzzle come together, and they took control of the situation, and they didn't procrastinate. That's the key, is that the longer that you procrastinate and the longer that you wait, the less and less, of course, you're going to be able to really make a significant difference in how much it's going to cost you to go to college. Are 529 plans the best way to save? That's a good question. If you have a 529 plan, is this the best use of your educational dollars? What are the so-called benefits? How do they affect financial aid? Well, the so-called benefit is that the growth is tax-free if it's used for college. But how much growth do you even have in the 529 plan? Were you aggressive in it? What were the market conditions at the time? Did you go through some ups and downs? And is there really a lot of growth? And would you have been better off putting that money somewhere else? These are all questions that you probably should have been asking throughout the 529 process. And then a big one is, if you do have some money saved up, do you use it in that freshman year, or do you spread it throughout? So these are all questions that maybe that hasn't kind of shown up or hasn't crossed your mind, but certainly ones that you have to ask. This is a story from the Wall Street Journal, and it was a few years back. So if the student's name is if their name is a beneficiary of this 529, unfortunately, the institution can basically say, oh, well, last year the child got $30,000 from a 529, and it looks the same. So we're going to eliminate some of that need because you have that money in a 529. Remember when I went earlier in the workshop where I said families that save oftentimes are penalized? This is one of those examples where you can be penalized for being an aggressive saver or doing your due diligence to save some money. So again, if you have them, we highly recommend that you take that free one-on-one consultation so we can look and see how much money you have in a 529. If you don't, and talk and figure out, is this the best use, or would you be better off somewhere else? Another point that we'll make, and this is from section Q of the CSS profile, where they ask, enter the total value of assets held in 529 college savings plans that were established by the student or for the student by someone else other than the student's parents. And they're trying to really dig into, well, if it's not the parents' money, the grandparents' money. So grandparents' money in a 529 may be a decent thing. It may not. It really depends on your individual situation. But once again, it's not exactly money. They want you to disclose this money so that they know how much you're capable of paying for college. So once again, look at your 529 plan. If you haven't, make sure you have a competent college funding advisor, at least examine it before you apply for financial aid. Well, in the same way that tax laws change, so have multiple spending bills pertaining to education, and it always has something to do with the FAFSA or the higher education system. In fact, the most recent one, the Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act of 2020, sort of changed the entire landscape of financial aid and how you get it. And I'm not going to go through each one of these laws and amendments, but you can just see where legislation plays a big part in the financial aid picture, in the financial aid game. And if you're not on top of all these particular things, you're not going to know. In the same way that CPAs have to stay on top of tax laws, we try our best to really stay on top of the financial aid legislation, the laws, and how it changes from one year to the next. My recommendation to everyone for how not to become a casualty of this is start the financial and tax planning early. You know, in the same way you don't start your tax planning on April 15th, you begin January 1st of the previous year. Really, college funding is no different. You don't want to wait till your senior year. Start it now. If your child's a freshman, start the legwork now. You know, get the playbook in the first quarter and take that first step in order to do it. Make sure that if you do have a tax professional, they're completely aware of the integration and the coordination necessary between your tax and college funding situations. And really don't even think about filing out either your tax or your college financial aid forms without doing the proper planning first. Very, very important. Getting maximum money for college can be confusing, and the tax laws, as you saw, can really make it complicating. So it just gets bigger, and you have to understand tax provision. It's just not the financial aid stuff. It's also the tax. And these are some questions to ask yourself. Should you elect the American Opportunity Tax Credit? Do you make too much money to qualify for the American Opportunity Tax Credit? Should you refinance your home to pay for college? And what are the restrictions on IRAs and how they're used for college expenses? All very important questions that you need to ask yourself when it comes to paying for all of this. So what are your options? Well, number one, you can do it on your own, and the colleges will love you for it. In fact, the colleges will take advantage, as they have for many families. I mean, you've all seen the headlines out there. We have a debt crisis, and there's a big reason why we are $1.7 trillion, not billion, $1.7 trillion in student loan debt, because colleges have taken advantage of families for a lot of years. You can let your accountant do it for you, but keep in mind, tax formulas are totally different than financial aid formulas, and filling out those tax returns are totally different than filling out college aid forms. Accountants tend to apply their accounting principles to financial aid, and that can really skew the results. So once again, it's knowing the rules and knowing the information that is really pertinent to the college financial aid process. If you do work with a college funding specialist, you need to ask yourself, what exactly are they going to do for me? Are they going to work with income and asset planning? Are they going to help you pick the best schools, public schools, private schools, schools that really fit the major that you're looking to study? Are they going to fill out the forms, all of those forms, the FAFSA, the CSS profile, institutional forms? Are they going to negotiate with schools? Do they offer guarantees? When should you start planning? And then what's the next step in the process? If you have someone who can help you, make sure you ask these questions. Can you show me how to lower my SAI and maximize my eligibility for aid? Can you help me pick schools that will give me the best aid packages? Remember, we want to meet the most need, more free money, less loans, less red money. Help me with the FAFSA, the CSS profile. Help me negotiate if I get a bad award. And then can you show me how to pay for college on a tax favored basis if I don't qualify for financial aid? So yeah, make sure you have the answers to these particular questions. Our mission when we help with clients is really threefold. Number one, to eliminate. We want to eliminate the administrative nightmare, which is filtered with countless opportunities for mistakes, which cause families to lose some or even all of their financial aid. Number two, we want to integrate sound financial planning strategies with the financial aid rules and regulations that are out there and that change all the time. Very important. And number three, implement. We want to implement college admissions and financial aid strategies that will help children attend their dream schools, and then consequently making paying for it more easily affordable. Now, our guarantee, we offer a guarantee on our services. We want our clients to be happy, and we want to know that they couldn't have gone through this whole process without our help. And because of that, if any of our clients are not satisfied, we give them their money back. And we stand behind what we do 100%, because no family has ever come into us and left worse off than when they started. So we stand behind our services, and because of that, we give our satisfaction guaranteed. So what we do, we provide income and asset planning recommendations to help reduce your SAI as much as possible. We help you choose the schools that give the best financial aid packages, help you with the financial aid forms. We interview your student and give them access to the most efficient student positioning tools that are available when it comes to essay writing, career profiling, college profiling, SAT, ACT test prep. Negotiate on your behalf to make sure that you're getting the best financial aid packages out there. Really create a personalized plan to help pay and help your family make those out-of-pocket expenses in the most cost and tax-efficient way possible. And we really do all this in a very professional, timely manner where if you don't feel completely satisfied, we will 100% refund your fees, no hassles, and no hard feelings. So ask yourself these questions. How many of you are interested in knowing what your financial aid package might look like at the schools that you're considering before you apply? and if there's any strategies that you can take advantage of to help increase the chances of enrollment at your student's dream school and make paying for college more easily affordable. All right, so if you are interested in finding all of these things out, we encourage you to take advantage of the free one-on-one 1-hour consultation. Now, a link will pop up at the bottom of your screen. Click on that link, and from there, you can choose a day and a time that really works for your schedule and booking your consultation. And if you book it and something happens over that, we can always find a different day and time. So don't be concerned if that the initial day and time that you pick out will always work, and we can reschedule somewhere down the line. However, we do have some requirements for that free consultation. It does need to be initially scheduled within 3 weeks of this workshop. That's number one. Number two, if you're married, we ask that both parents be present. Very important. And number three, in order to facilitate the volume of free consultations that we hold, we ask that you schedule your appointment on this particular day in doing so. So by doing that, by clicking the link that pops up at the bottom of your screen. All right, one of three things will happen at that free consultation. Number one, you're going to get all the additional information that you're looking for so that you can do this yourself. Okay. Number two, you're going to decide that you want to handle part of the college planning process and you want us to do part of it. Or number three, you're going to decide that it's overwhelming. You want to eliminate the stress and anxiety. You want absolutely nothing to do with the long and tedious financial aid and college planning process. And you want us to take everything off of your plate. As we like to say, if you spend thousands of dollars to ensure that you're at the front of the line at Disney World, then why not do it for your child's financial future and their education? Remember what I said, when it comes to financial aid, first come, first serve. You want to be at the front of the line in order to get that done. So I would encourage you guys to go ahead, book an appointment. Our one-on-one consultations are free of charge, no obligation to you and your family. And want to thank everybody out there for watching. My name is John Borick, and good luck to your students as they navigate and go off to college and enjoy the process. And remember the link at the bottom of your screen in order to sign up.